cooking demo. This week we've been celebrating Pirate Week here at the Senior Center. Monday was International Talk Like a Pirate Day, so we couldn't just let that go without having some fun with it. So why are we doing a cracker demo? Talk Like a Pirate Week. We couldn't think of a pirate food that anyone would actually want to eat nowadays, because you think of what people had on ships when they were on ships for long periods of time. Was probably not really not really tasty, probably really super salted, so preserved, or just
I
just not so
I
good.
guess they're just flour, soda, and water.
Yeah, and crackers aren't too far from that, so it's a bit of a notch to SeaTac. But also, the good old joke, Polly wants a cracker, so if you're going to give Polly a cracker, you have to make the crackers.
Right.
So that's what we're doing today. We're making crackers. Though if you're actually going to go through all the trouble of making crackers and not just buying a box, because this is probably the fastest and easiest way to eat a cracker, and the cookie cracker aisle has so many varieties, we probably don't think to make our own. That said, there's a lot of things on a cracker package that you can't even read because there's a lot of preservatives and different things in crackers to keep them shelf stable for a long period of time. You may also have people in your life that have food allergies or gluten intolerant, or there's just so many food aversions nowadays, or somebody who's going keto so they don't eat carbohydrates. So there's just a lot of things you can do in making your own crackers that you can customize to either your own dietary needs, or if I'm likely to do it, I'm known for making cheese balls at Christmas time. So making some homemade crackers to go with said cheese ball makes it kind of a nice custom gift. Unique. A lot of people get jams or jellies at Christmas time, or fudge, or sweet things. I've got a lot of salty people in my life, so they like that salty, tangy treats. So crackers and cheese balls are kind of what they enjoy. So I can play with crackers and customize them. So we're going to do one kind of cracker today. I should say one kind of cracker dough. It's a flaky, buttery cracker. Again, it only has 5 ingredients, and we'll go through those. But when, of course, I was playing with that dough, I wanted to show how it could go different. So we're going to be eating the samples and not the dough today. So this is the same dough that I did 4 different ways. So we are going to have some white cheddar crackers. We are going to have onion, garlic, and Italian seasoning. We are going to have just olive oil and black lava salt. And we are going to have some sharp cheddar. So same basic dough that again you get to either brush, put things on, or add things into. Does this sound good to you? When you're making your own, I'm going to be making them with good old boring white flour today. If you have someone with a food allergy or a special dietary need, if they're gluten intolerant, you are not going to use this because this will make them very unhappy with you. But you can use rice flours, you can use almond flour, you can use pretty much any kind of flour that you can find that matches their dietary need, you can replace flour with. There are some cracker recipes that get pretty exotic that you might have to start, playing with a little bit to do some substitutions, but in general, crackers are pretty basic. They get dry and crispy, okay? So and they generally come in different textures, so, they aren't going to know if it didn't turn out quite the way you wanted, as long as it's crisp.
Right.
Okay? Crackers cook at high heat, generally about 400 degrees, thereabouts, for short periods of time. So with these crackers, you're going to see how thin I roll them. Sorry, it's not going to pick up on the camera, because if I try to pick it up, it's just going to flop over. But the instructions will tell you to roll them as thin as you can. The thinner you get your cracker, the crispier it's going to get. So you'll be able to, when you get a cheese cracker, you're going to see there's a difference between it and some of these other ones. Once the shredded cheese was put in, it kind of kept the dough from rolling thin because the cheese was lumpy. So it didn't want to roll as flat. So these are a little bit thicker. This is more like wheat thin, crispy texture. And these other ones will be more, I don't know if you had one of those snapped.
Yeah.
It's like the Ritz baked chips that are out now. They're more like, you know, or crackers. They're more like chips.
Yeah.
They're baked, but they're really good. But they're really thin and they kind of poof up. These are more like that. All right. And again, so you can change your fats with those. I have some butter. You can switch that out. Again, you're going to want to use a solid fat, so you could use coconut oil. They might spread a little bit more. It might be harder to work with because that has that melting point that's, you start touching it and it kind of gets oozy. Butter, you know, holds up a little bit better. So you might have to play with that a little bit to find a fat substitute that allows you to work with it, but not completely dissolving your hands. And again, people are watching sodium levels. You can, you know, add less salt if people really like it. You can add more. You can find alternatives. I almost thought about sprinkling some crackers with Mrs. Dash just to see what happens. I know that in concept it's going to work, you know, and add that flavor, but, you know, I just don't let it go. All right, so now here's the recipe. So you're going to need a bowl. You're going to need a rolling pin. You are going to need some measuring devices, measuring spoons, measuring cups. And you can use a food processor. I don't have a food processor here at the Senior Center. So I have my pastry blender. This is, you know, old school, get some frustration out kind of cooking here. But if you have a food processor, you can certainly do this in your food processor. It's, it'll kind of look like a pie dough. If you've ever mixed a pie dough in your food processor. Okay. I know my crowd, and most of them still go old school and don't have all the gadgets, so I figured I was safe. But just know you can use an electronic device if you choose. I did use my pastry cutter to make my crackers last night, and it worked just fine. So, all right, we are going to get started. So this is one batch of dough. So these are the crackers from, you know, all of these came out of one batch of recipe. We are going to divide it into 4 to roll out so it's workable. So these are just the 4 chunks of dough that I then took 4 different directions. Just want to make sure you knew the output for how much was going in.
Right.
So we're going to be using 1 1/4 cups of flour, which is pretty much this whole bag because I pre-measured. And I was pulling some out. But you do want some left over because obviously if you're rolling things out, you need some flour to try to keep things from being sticky. All right, so there's our 1 1/4 cups. I didn't pre-measure this part, so I was too lazy. It's going to look really small. Add a little tablespoon of sugar. A lot of crackers don't involve sugar, but these are kind of have a sweet element, which makes it sound like they're super sweet, but
No.
you can do the full 1/2 teaspoon of salt, or if you want to be good, do less. Because there's so few ingredients, you know, you start taking salt out or sugar out, it really does just taste like flour, but that's kind of the basics of a cracker. What you add to a cracker tends to be where most of the flavor happens. I do like to brush mine with olive oil.
Before or after cooking?
Before. I'm ahead of myself. All right, so once you got your dry ingredients, you just kind of mix your sugar, your salt, and your flour together. Kind of get it distributed a little bit. And then you've got 4 tablespoons of butter going in. All right. And there's 1/3 cup of water. So the water, if you've ever made any kind of pastry or bread product, you add a little bit at a time. I'd say you could start with 1/2 and then just keep adding in. Well, last night I ended up adding pretty much all of it in. So right now we're just cutting that butter into the dry ingredients, and this is where you get to come up with your own theme song. It takes a few minutes for it to get cut in. And of course you eventually have to do that fun thing where you knock it over your phone because it gets jammed in there. Yeah, I know when you're doing pie crusts and things, usually they say until your butter looks pea-sized, and then I like, because it's, well, doing it so thin when we roll it out, I try to make sure we get it pulverized pretty much as best as I can, distributed amongst the flour. So
I'm not good at making pie crust either, so. This is helpful.
all right.
Wow. look at
So really it still kind of looks like flour, but there is that fat mixed in there. So it's like lumpy flour right now.
that. Okay.
Slightly lumpy flour, which is usually something you'd want to avoid if it was just the flour sack. All right, so I'm going to add, so we've got about a 1/3 cup of room temperature water. So I added half of it in to start off with. If you're using a food processor, well, if you just leave it on whizzing and then you start drizzling the water in. I can't drizzle and blend at the same time. So if you're doing it by all brute force, you're just going to do little bits at a time. Stop, add some more. And you're just adding until you start to see the dough come together. So it's starting to come together. Add a little bit more. I've got just a little bit of flour that's not quite wanting to join the party. So I'm probably going to leave just a little bit left in my cup today, because you're trying to avoid it getting too soggy. I almost did on that last batch. Just knocking things off. There you go. See how it starts to come together, almost like the sides of your mixing bowl if you're making cookies or
Right.
dough, and it starts just, it wants to cling together.
Right.
That's the lovely joy of those technical things called glutens, which act like a glue that pull everything together. So, there we go. All right, so it's kind of our dough. Next up, again, you're going to take some of that extra flour that you kept out. Sprinkle your board onto a non-porous surface. So if you have tile countertops, you're going to have to find someplace else to roll out your dough, because if it's something that's got, obviously rolling doughs out on anything that's not flat makes it very difficult to peel up what you just rolled out. I used to live in a house that had 8-inch tile countertops. Drive me crazy. I used to have to roll everything out on my kitchen table, just it had a flat surface.
Right.
You're going to want to flour your rolling pin, flour your surface, flour your hands. All right, I'm just going to bring that together. All right, so here's our lovely little ball of dough. And, you know, it's got a slight stick to it, but not a bunch. So it's maintaining shape pretty well. And I'm just going to give it a quick toss in the flour just so I can work with it a little bit better, because this is where I say we're going to divide it into fourths. If I thought to brought a knife out, I would have used a knife to do this. But for the sake of today, kind of give a nice even shape, and we're just going to do the quarters. And I'm just going to kind of pull apart in half, and then in half again. All right. If you want to be really technical, you can get out your measuring weight, and you can weigh all pieces out to be super even. I am not that meticulous of a baker. So there we go. Those are our 4 balls of dough. And you can see it's just kind of like a handful.
Yeah.
You know, take, I don't think you need me to do the same thing 4 times over. So we'll do one. So I'm just kind of finished rounding into a little ball, bring my flour back together in the center. Just going to kind of get it started pushing it down and flat. One of the ways you can keep it from sticking, sometimes when you roll out, things start sticking and not wanting to come up. especially these, because you're going to be rolling them so thin. You want to make sure you have quite a bit of flour underneath. And after you roll, every once in a while, turn it. So you keep getting flour underneath, keeping it moving around, and you can check on it. So, back and forth. And if you want to go evenly, I was taught to start in the center and roll out. So that's what I'm doing here. It feels like you're playing with pizza crust, because you know how when you roll pizzas, it kind of gets thin. And I will say one of the exasperating parts is, of course, you're trying to roll a rectangle. Doesn't generally work for me very well. As I said, of course, I forgot to bring a knife out because I wasn't thinking about cutting it out. So we're going to have to pretend in the land of Nod. So we're pretending my spoon is a knife for the moment. So once you get it thin, you almost see through it, right? It's almost transparent. I can see the gray of my countertop through it. It's really, really thin. I mean, you can be aggressive and go thinner if you want, but it gets really hard to peel it back up off your surface. Just try to get your fingers under it after a while. So it's about as thin as I like to go. I mean, it's thicker than paper, but thinner than most crackers you see on the market. And once you've got your knife, you can also use a pizza cutter. Oh, yeah. This is where you kind of square it up. So, I kind of get things going into a rectangular shape. We're kind of pretending right now. So trim off the edges. That excess you can do like you would normally do with good old pie crust dough or cookie dough. If you're cutting out cookies, you set it to the side and you can ball it up to make more later. Once you get it trimmed into a square, I think I generally do about 1.5 2-inch crackers, and you just go ahead and continue to cut it down to the size of crackers you want. Cut them apart. So I'm going to do one with my good old spoon. This is the most hilarious thing I've done today, using the edge of a spoon as a knife blade. As I try to pull it apart, it gets bigger. So you're just going to get your cracker shaped the way you want. It's more like 2.5 inch on this one since I pulled it apart. So you just get these little thin, almost like little paper pieces of dough.
So will that shrink when it's baked?
It will shrink a little bit because you're cooking with high heat. Generally, it kind of shocks it a bit. All right. On your baking sheet, I'm a big believer in parchment paper so things don't stick. It is my friend. So you'll line your baking sheets with parchment paper, and then all of your little cutout crackers, you're going to lay out. They don't need a bunch of spacing. So when you do cookies, things poof up a lot, start to run out and spread. These aren't going to spread. So you can give it about 1/2 inch apart.
Okay.
On your cookie sheet. And yeah, just get a whole tray full going. Now, I said squares. Now, if you've ever bought crackers or walked down the cracker aisle, they come in circles, squares, triangles, odds and ends, free-form bits. All of that is fair game. You do not have to do square crackers. You can break out your cookie cutters and have really, wacky shaped crackers if you wanted to. But I feel it's important, you'll see with my samples, trying to get them kind of even in size will help them cook more evenly, especially if you have a finicky oven. I have an oven that likes to cook warmer in the back of the oven than in the front of the oven. So if I don't do the magic 180 turn mid-bake, things in the back could get to be this lovely dark brown color, while things in the front, while I'm looking through the glass, have the nice golden brown color that I'm looking for. So if you know your oven, if uniformity is super important to your success, you can be free form, but try to make it a similar size of free form. Okay, so once you get all of your cookies, I'm going to call them cookies now, crackers on your baking sheet, this is when, if you wanted to do something fun with them, They can certainly go in the oven just like this for a very basic cracker. I like a lot of flavor, so this is where my creativity starts playing out. You can brush them, you can melt some butter and brush them with butter if you want a more buttery flavor. If you're a little bit more, calorie friendly, you can brush them with olive oil. All of these were brushed with olive oil because I just poured some out and stuck to the same thing. Except for the cheddar, because cheese gets kind of oily, so I didn't want to do cheese that as it melts get oily and then add more oil on top of the cheese. So if you're doing something with a lot of natural cheese and not just cheese flavoring, you might not want to brush it with oil or add wet things to cheese. And I like to brush olive oil if I'm going to add a dry topping. So if I'm going to add salt or herbs, and putting that olive oil on top helps it kind of fuse to the cracker, because it's like imagine if you've got a sugar cookie that doesn't have frosting on it, and you just try to put sprinkles on it, and they're just going to roll off the cookie, right? So that olive oil or that melted butter, gives something for that salt to stick to, so as the cookie bakes, and then it can kind of adhere to your cracker longer. So brushing with olive oil, it's not going to add a whole bunch of flavor, but it lets your other things stick. So brush it with your, butter or olive oil, and then if you want to sprinkle with salt, or if you want to add herbs or flax seeds or any of those fun things, you can sprinkle them on top of your tray. You're going to have your oven at 400 degrees. You're going to go stick your cookie sheet in. Again, if you have a fun oven, you might have to stop it 5 minutes the way through and rotate. But it takes about 8 to 10 minutes depending on your oven and how big of a cookie sheet you use. I have some monstrous cookie sheets, so it might take you a little longer if you've got smaller cookie sheets, less time. But yeah, about 8 to 10 minutes, and you can pull your first batch out of the oven. You want them to start to be kind of golden brown. There's some brown on the edges. And some of the side, they'll need to cool for a few minutes, then you can transfer them off the sheet. You need to start another batch to put on, or if you've got a second cookie sheet you've already lined up, you can put those in the oven. And as I said, so I made one batch of doughs, and then I did 4 different crackers. So each tray went in with a different topping. So it was kind of a fun way to diversify with not a whole lot more work. I was having to make 4 batches of crackers. I just did something different.